What's up there, Workforce? Chris here with WorkToGame, and I wanted to go through some acronyms. I was out there looking through lists. I was looking something up the other day, got stuck deep down in the internet, came across this list, link in the description below, and thought it'd just be interesting to kind of run through this, elaborate on anything that I think needs it. A couple things that I already saw just before I forget that would be in this list is I think Dancer will probably be D and C, and I think Gunbreaker will probably be Gun. While I'm at it, I think Shadowbringers, I've been calling it SHB. I don't know what everyone's going to call it. SB2. I don't know. I don't know what the plan is there. So let's dive in and get to it. So A and then a number stands for Alexander. It's a raid. And so you represent, the different terms. So there's Gordius, a 1 through 4, Midas 5 through 8, the Creator 9 through 12, and then sometimes they'll put like an S after it or an N after it or whatever to determine if you're doing it on normal or savage. You're probably seeing this in Party Finder because you're running old content. ACC is the stat accuracy, so when you're talking about stat priority and you're going to put materia on gear and people want to start talking about, well, what's this, what's that, and they start theory crafting, but the gear mostly takes care of it itself, so unless you're really kind of at the top of it, you won't run across this too often. ACN is your Arcanist class. Ads are kind of the additional mobs that pop up during a fight. Usually it's like, hey, the off tank needs to pick up the ads, or hey, tank, you missed an ad. And ads will typically go kill your healers. And so it's important that you know about those if there are going to be ads spawning in a certain phase. Artifact armor is the iconic armor of your job, obtained by finishing your level 45 and 50 job quests. This game is a lot of people play this game heavily for like glamour and stuff. So hold on to that stuff if you're into like appearance, because you can make things look like that later. AFK, away from keyboard. I'm sure you know that if you played a lot of games, but maybe you didn't. Aggro is the attention of enemies. This is sometimes called enmity, threat, hate. These are all synonyms for the same thing. ALC is your alchemist. Anima is the anima weapons. Relic is basically a gear progression that's isolated within each expansion. So we had a relic for 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and they're all separate from each other really. And so anima was just part of that series for Heavensward. AoE is your area of effect. So the fact that when you do something, it affects multiple things. AoEs are sometimes described with the shape that they're in. So sometimes it's a circle, sometimes it's a cone, things like that. ARC, Archer. ARM Armor. ARR is A Realm Reborn. That's 2.0. That is effectively the beginning of this game since we dropped 1.0. So there was a 1.0. Think of that as like a prequel. We've kept certain things from it. Characters got to be transferred over. And we started with ARR and we've moved forward. So we have 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 live. We're going into 5.0 as of this recording. And then AST Astrologian. BCOB. This is your Binding Coil of Bahamut. This is got 13 turns to it. So 13 kind of instance, just like the Alexander I was saying earlier. So you've got 13 parts. And so you'll see people talk about it. And then like 10 to 13 is known as Final Coil of Bahamut. BIS is best in slot. Usually you're talking about like, oh, that's the best gear currently available for that item. So like that's my best in slot helm. And then BLM is Black Mage. A bonus or something no bonus, that's usually referring to like experience. So when you go into content for the first time as a character and sometimes as a class, you'll get that. It'll grant the whole party an experience bonus. You'll see it down in your chat log if there's one available. BRB is Be Right Back. BRD is Bard. BSM is Blacksmith. BTN is Botanist. So you notice there's a lot of class abbreviations in here. They're all simplified down to 3 because all your classes are on one character. Your gear sets is a great way to keep track of this. It'll kind of handle it for you. CC is crowd control. And so you'll have things like sleep. Most dungeons don't call for this really, at least at this time. It's not been a big thing. CD is your cooldown. That's also sometimes you'll see things like, I assume it's in here, GCD. So that CD cooldown being something that you need to be aware of, that when you see CD together, that's typically cooldown in reference to games. C&J is Conjurer. CRP is Carpenter. CT is Crystal Tower. I assume that Crystal Tower will get referred to a lot in the next expansion, just based around what we know in the lore right now, but who knows? CUL is Culinarian. DD is damage dealer. I typically actually I hear this referred to as DPS instead. DEF is defense, DEX is dexterity. So you kind of need to get a feel for where your classes fall within what stats you're looking for. You only really need to know the abbreviations for those. DF is duty finder. This is often referring to like, duty finder, party finder, PF. Those are different terms, but looking at kind of the same type of content. DOH is disciple of hand. These are your crafters. DOL is your disciples of land. These are your gatherers. So just recognize DOH and DOL. And then DOM, it's a lot of times you'll see it within like gear sets and stuff. Oh, this can be equipped by DOL or DOH or whatever. DOM is your Disciples of Magic. So this is looking at your ranged magic casters. DOT is a dot. So I don't know if it'll go over hot. I'm just reading through this list here. Dot is damage over time. Hot is heal over time. And that means that a spell maybe has an initial impact, maybe it doesn't, but then it has a series of impacts maybe every second for 15 seconds or whatever. And so think of like poison, right? It doesn't hit you all at once. It kind of trickles out on you. DOW is your Disciples of War. And so that's looking at your physical damage. You do have physical ranged, magic ranged, and then you have your melee damage dealers, your DPS, and your healers. Your tanks and your healers. DPS is damage per second, but oftentimes, like I said, the damage dealers are referred to as DPS because they do DPS. I don't know. DRG is Dragoon. DRK is Dark Knight. EN is English. EM or EX, I typically hear EX, is extreme mode. This is when you talk about difficulty, you have normal mode and then like hard mode. Hard mode typically just scales it up to the current level, and then you have extremes. There's also like savage and things like that, where we start to talk about harder versions of certain types of content. Ultimate being the hardest content, but we don't get that every patch. That's a very rare thing for that fight. Fate actually stands for Full Active Time Event, but they're basically open world little quest things you can do. You can just hop right in. A lot of times they require a group, so when you're pulling it by yourself, just be aware. FC is your free company. It's basically a guild, clan, whatever game you're coming from calls it. FFXIV is probably the most common way to search for this game, but FF14 works. FPS is your frames per second, so that has to do with kind of talking about lag and latency and things like that. FR is French. FSH is Fisher. GC is Grand Company. So a Grand Company, are basically these NPC forces you fight alongside, the Immortal Flames, the Maelstrom, the Adder, and you kind of climb up the ranks, and they have all sorts of neat loot and gear and currencies that you can do. So it's important that you kind of integrate with them. They have a squadron that can really help you out with things, and so that's really good. There's GCD, Global Cooldown, and so that's a 2.5 second time until you can cast the next ability. There are OCO GCDs, and that's off the global cooldown, and so that means that ability does not have any respect for the fact that, okay, for 2.5 seconds we can't do anything else, except this guy can. And so that's really good. GG is good game. A lot of times that's used sarcastically. GH is Guildhest, and so these are like sub dungeons, so like little partial dungeons. They're only levels, like they're only really up to level 40, but they're a great thing when you're first getting into the game or first learning how to play a role because they're pretty low pressure. GL is Guild Leave. And so there are guild leaves, and then there are just like battle leaves and gathering leaves and things like that. Leaves basically pull from your 100 leave allowance, and they're like repeatable quests. A GM is a game master. If a GM is messaging you, that's a Square Enix employee. So just, they don't do anything weird or hanky. They're never going to ask for your password, but they are the ones that would seek out to whisper you if you needed help in game, or if they were going to ban you. A GM is that. GLA is Gladiator. GSM is Goldsmith. HM is Hard Mode. So usually hard mode just ups the level range. I don't really feel it ups the difficulty per se, outside of the fact that it ups the level range. There's heal over time. Hot's just like dot. It's just over time, especially when you see that lowercase o followed by time. That's over time. HP is your health pool. They said HP stands for HP. That's not helpful. That's your health points, health pool, depending on kind of whether or not you think of that from like D&D or where your background is. HQ is high quality. That means that it gives more stats than what NQ is, which is your normal quality. And it means it's crafted by a crafter. And so a crafter basically has 2 bars to fill. They have the bar that says whether or not they're going to complete the item before the durability on it runs out and their craft fails. And then they have the high quality, which determines the percent chance that the resulting item is high quality. And high quality items typically command a higher price point on the market board. So there is no reason for your high quality stuff to be listed below the normal quality price. Anybody who wants that, because the high quality items, if a crafter uses them, it makes it easier for them to get high quality results. So they will pay a little more for them in most cases. Eye level determines the item level. Basically, as long as it's the same gear as your type, so if you're looking at Black Mage Magic Caster gear, then as long as the comparable gear is also Black Mage Caster gear, same with tank gear to tank gear and so on, you're looking for that highest eye level possible. Most of it will take care of itself after that. INC is incoming. That means that there's guys coming at you. So just be aware of like an incoming wave of enemies or something like that. Ads, etc. And then Int is intelligence. So while we're talking about ink, sometimes you'll see PAT. That's your patrol. A patrol is basically a set of mobs that walk back and forth, and you may accidentally pull them. You may piss them off if you get too close to them, and so you want to pay attention to not pull those, to body pull them. And body pulling means that you pulled by proximity. You didn't toss a spell at them. A tank didn't hit them with a tomahawk to intentionally pull them. You pulled them by just getting too close, because if you get too close, they do that. IRL is in real life. JP is Japanese, typically referring to like, oh, what's going on the JP servers or whatever. Kite means that you're like running away, not letting a mob hit you. So you might be like running, turn, shoot, and it never catches you. So you kite it. And so picture like running and pulling a kite behind you. LB is your limit break. Basically, the whole party has this bar that fills up, and then one person uses it. What the limit break ends up being is based on your role. So a tank limit break is defensive. A healing limit break is healing. DPS is a big chunk of damage. So they're a little more different than that. We have a guide up on it if you want to know more about limit breaking. LF means looking for. So you may see LFG looking for group, LFM looking for more, LFP looking for party, and you may see like looking for healer, looking for a tank, or look at LF1M. That means looking for one more, right? And so that just is usually used in like in any situation where somebody's trying to recruit for a party. LNC is Lancer. LOS is line of sight. Typically, this is referring to line of sighting a mob to make it run around to you because it won't attack you. Even if it's ranged, if it can't see you, it will move. So I'm gonna move behind this pillar and line of sight it so that it will come close to me, trying to kill me. And then LOS is also like your healer may say, hey, don't LOS me, because if you LOS them, then they can't heal you. LOV is Lords of Verminion, also sometimes has an M after it, and that's basically a mini pet battle style game. It's meant to be kind of like RTS, like 3 lanes, very like Dota-esque. It's a weird mini game, not my personal taste, but gives you a lot of MGP if you complete it every week. LS is a link shell. This is basically a chat channel that's up that you can go cross-world and things like that. And it's usually centered around a type of event. So there'll be like a hunt link shell. And so by being in that link shell, anybody who's talking there is talking about like, hey, you want to get together to do some hunts? One second. As a side note, I taught my puppy how to use a doorbell, and so now if you hear that from time to time, that's him, and he's like a teenage boy. He'll just keep ringing it until you go get him. So, where was I? Link Shell, LTW, Leatherworker. MB is your market board. That's like your auction house where you trade things. They are traded through retainers. You can only have 20 items per retainer. You start with 2 retainers per character, but you can increase that if you pay more money every month to Square Enix. Machinist is MCH, Miner is MIN, MGP. This is the Manderville Golden Saucer points. This is basically your minigame points. And so when you go there and you do all the different minigames, they all give you MGP. The best way to get a lot of MGP is to do your weekly challenge log, do the big things like the lottery ticket and stuff like that. And you use them to buy, there's cool mounts and all sorts of stuff locked behind that. So feel free to go dive into that whenever you got free time. MND is mind. I don't know why we abbreviate that. MNK is monk. A mob is a monster. So it's like an ad, a mob, a monster, a creep. It just depends on what game you come from, what you may call it. And it's been long enough over the years that a lot of these terms have just shifted in and out. MP is typically your magic points. We'll see if this changes. Going into Shadowbringers, we know they're getting rid of TP, so they may call this AP or something action points. But basically, in addition to your health pool, you have another currency that you're going to have stored up that recovers at a certain rate if certain conditions are met. And you're going to use it to commit to cast spells and things like that. MRD is Marauder. MSQ is your main scenario quest. This is what you should be doing no matter what. MT means mistell. It's a quick way of saying like, oh, sorry, butt dial. Like, didn't mean to do that. NIN is Ninja. NPC is a non-player character. So that means that they're computer controlled. NQ is that normal quality. So typically referred to for crafting. And then O and then a number has to do with Omega. So once again, another raid series. There's like Deltascape represents 0, 1 through 4, and so on. And then you can talk. They may even put like a V before like the number or something like that. And once again, there's going to be an N and a lot of times an S if they're trying to refer to Savage in that. There's the OGCD is now there, and then OMW on my way. I'm sure you know that because your iPhone now corrects it. OOM means out of mana. Even if they change what mana is called, that's still a common term across all games to say, like, I'm out of resources, like I can't do anymore. And it's really commonly thrown out by your healer to be like, hey, stop pulling things, because when I run out of my current pool of points here, I'm not going to be able to cast any more heals, and we're going to die. So that's pretty common. OT stands for off tank, and MT would stand for main tank. And basically that determines which tank is going to be doing the big boss and then which tank is not. And so there could be a tank swap, which means that the off tank and the main tank are going to switch roles. But the off tank otherwise is usually responsible for adds or a secondary boss, or maybe just putting out additional DPS. PC, they say player character, typically just referred to as a player. PF is party finder, basically like duty finder, but now you're looking for very specific people, like you're putting out and saying, hey, I just want people that want to do this type of content in this way. It's something that duty finder is not meant or designed to handle. PGL is pugilist. Pi is piety. And then Pike says to stand or do nothing, but like I typically just refer that as either idle or AFK or something like that. PLD is paladin, and PoE is sometimes referred to as poetics. Poetics is something that like is still kind of around, and so you have these different, you'll see abbreviations for the different tome types, and people are just asking you how many you have because they cap out, and then you can go buy stuff from a vendor from them. POTD is Palace of the Dead. To kind of back up, HOH is Heaven on High. These are both deep dungeon. It's an alternate PvE progression system. PST is please send tell. So a lot of times this will be like, hey, if you have any info, like if you're interested in buying this, or if you're interested in joining my guild, PST. And that means like send me a whisper so that we can kind of chat privately, not in a party. And you do that by just doing /W or like right clicking on their name and whispering them. And then PT is your party. PUG is pickup group, a pug, and a lot of times it's not always used as a positive term, but it just has to do with the fact that like I just got tossed in with random people, typically through Duty Finder, some other form of roulette. Hey, we picked up a pug, that means one person randomly, or I ran it in a pug, which means that we were all random, things like that. Pull means that like that's how much you pull. So like a pull might be these 4 mobs might be standing together. I'm gonna pull those 4. That was a pull. When we finish the pull, things like that. You don't, and then chain pull means that as soon as we finish that 4 without any rest, we're going to go into the next pull, the next group of enemies. PvE is your player versus environment. This is all your like killing mobs, killing big beasts and monsters and stuff, and then PvP is killing players. So those are the 2 most common types of content that we're talking about. In most content in MMOs can be grouped into one of those 2 categories. It's a PvE thing or it's a PvP thing. And then you might see like RP, which is like role play. Relic is basically it's that alternative gear system, and you'll see it referred to different things. So like Eureka was the Stormblood one. And there were different Eurekas. So you may hear people say things like Hydatos and Pagos and all those. And if you look all those terms up, they're all just grouped within Eureka. RF is Raid Finder. It's just like Duty Finder, but you're talking about much higher end duties. RNG means that it's random. It stands for random number generator, but it typically just means like, what are you going to do? Like, it's just RNG. It's just bad luck. It's just, it just refers to the fact these games are number driven and it's random what happens. ROG is Rogue. SCH is Scholar. SB is Spirit Bond. Spirit Bond is the rate at which you build your items kind of being attached to you. And once they finish attaching to you, then you can grind them down into materia. And then SE is Square Enix. And then you have SR is a speed run. Sometimes that's a common abbreviation in Party Finder for people that want to like run things really quickly back to back. STR is Strength. THM is Thaumaturge. TP is just kind of like MP. It's a separate thing right now. We'll see what they do with the upcoming live letter. So as of this recording, they're separate things, but we could see that going away. TT is Triple Triad. That's like a mini game that is huge. Vitality, VIT, Warrior, WAR, WB, welcome back. So when you say like, hey, I have to go AFK for a second, you say back, you come back and you're like, I say I'm back. And people may say, hey, WB, welcome back. And WHM, White Mage. And there was that thing again. WS is Weapon Skill. WT is Wondrous Tales. It's basically like a big bingo card. You pick it up in Idleshire every week, and it has cool loot depending on how many like Connect 4 lines you do. WTB and WTS is Want to Buy, Want to Sell. Sometimes in games you see WTT, Want to Trade, if for some reason that's a thing. But basically it's just this is what I'm looking for. WVR is Weaver. And then a yalm is sometimes referred to as Y if you put it after a number, and that is a unit of distance, kind of like a meter or a yard. So how many yalms it is away. So that was a huge run through. Link in the description below if you want to refer to any of these. If you have any others you want to add, I know I added a few in there. There is a ton of abbreviations in this game. So hopefully just listening to this in the background kind of helps you go, oh, that's what that one means. But it's a big long list. I'm sure you knew most of them, but did you know all of them? Or are there any that this list missed? I definitely know that there are, because this game has a much bigger vocabulary than anything I could do in 20 minutes or less. So my name is Chris with WorkToGame. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. You guys ever wondered what's behind me? Let's go ahead and take a look. There's some Warhammer and gaming stuff. There's some German beer steins. There's a rainbow ball shooting out of his face unicorn, some Star Wars toys, some different architecture projects, some WorkToGame mugs, one with a chocobo on it, some Jeeps, and then my face, and then the first skyscraper I worked on in my first job out of college. So, yeah.